This video is going to be my third in the series of reviews of the Niner RKT 9. I did a first look and then I did an update 1. This is my update 2. And I've spent about a month and a half riding this bike. I'm in the middle of cross season, but I'm starting to spend more time on the mountain bike, especially as our fall weather is setting in and you just cannot avoid getting out on the trails. I've had two biases before I bought this bike that have started to be washed away the more time I spend on this bike. The first one, the big one, and I kind of expected this after doing a test ride on this bike before I bought it, and that is full suspension 29ers can be agile. I got away from full suspension 29ers a few years ago, went to 27.5 because of the agility. I really love the way 27.5 wheels maintain acceleration and agility on the trails more so than full suspension 29ers. But after being on this bike for a little over a month now, I absolutely love the agility of this RKT 9. With the shorter chainstays, you still have the stability of 29-inch wheels on this bike, but you do have a very agile bike. And 2 days ago, I set 2 personal records on my local trails using Strava. One of them was a segment that takes about my record on a Anthem 27.5 was set 2.5 years ago, and it was 13 minutes and 25 seconds. I beat it by 2 seconds. I haven't come close to that time since I set that record 2.5 years ago, and on this bike I beat it by 2 seconds. And now the trails are in really good shape. There was a cross-country race. The trails are really buff and smooth. But this bike is extremely fast. The other one was a shorter segment, and there was a King of the Mountain that I've been trying to get for over 4 years, and I got it on this bike. So one thing that I'm really getting used to on this bike is the traction. So it's not quite as agile as my Anthem 27.5 was, but the traction on this is a little bit better, and that's one thing. The more I ride it, the more I get used to. I can push a little bit harder in the corners and really rail some corners. Now in the past, when I used to ride full suspension 29ers, even though they had good traction, the wheelbases were long, the chainstays were long, and it was still hard to get around the corners as quickly. But on this bike with the tighter wheelbase, I'm telling you, it's so fast, and you get good traction. And you get the stability and the rollover ability of the 29-inch wheels. Now, the drawback to the agility of this bike is it is a twitchy bike. You have to be on your game. You cannot get lazy on this bike, especially when you're going downhill. I don't live in a mountainous area, so I've not taken this up in the mountains yet, so I can't really give feedback of how it's going to be on a rough descent. But I do know you have to kind of be on your game. And like I said, you can't get lazy with the handling because it is a twitchy bike. Now it's kind of unique because my Anthem 27.5 had the agility was in the wheels, and it had a little bit slacker head angle to be a little bit more stable in the steering department. Whereas this one, the head angle is a little steeper, but the wheels are bigger, so you get the stability there. So you know, the trade-off in the super quick handling 29er is it can be a little twitchy, so you just have to be aware of that. The other bias that has been erased over the last month of riding this bike, it's more minor, but the remote lock on the rear shock. I said in one of my previous videos that I wish Niner would have put on a regular DPS shock, but the more I've gotten used to this shock with the remote lockout, the more I've liked it. You know, it does give my left thumb something to do. So with the death of the front derailleur in mountain bikes, you do free up your left thumb for either a dropper post or on a cross-country bike like this, a remote lockout. And what's unique about this is I find myself using an open setting on the shock a lot more often than I used to. So if I have just a short downhill, one that's a little bit too short to warrant reaching down and unlocking the shock with my hand on a regular shock, I'll just pop this thing open, and it works great. And so again, I find myself using it quite a bit, a lot more often than I thought, and it really does make the ride more supple on the downhill. So I have a more supple rear end more often on downhills than I used to, Now this bike does have 90 millimeters of travel, whereas my previous bike had 100. I will say that this bike uses the travel really well. I mean, it does ramp up pretty quick on a hard hit. You know, it's only 90 millimeters, so the only time you really notice it is on a G out or a hard hit where it uses the travel quickly. But the CVA suspension on the Niners is similar to the Giant Maestro in that the bike does firm up when you pedal real hard, when you're out of the saddle going up a hill, and it's pretty plush. Now I would give the advantage to Maestro a little bit in terms of overall plushness, but like I said, opening up this rear shock all the way on downhills real easily with the remote lockout makes the rear end pretty supple. So I do like CVA suspension. Like I said, it is similar to the Maestro, so I'm somewhat familiar with it. Let me show the bike up close, some of the things that I've done. I've changed out the cables, and I want to show that and show how that changing the cables has actually helped me really enjoy this remote lockout. So this bike came with Jaguar cables, and I'm not sure why, but I got a lot of friction. It may be because I use regular grease that I've done in the past, but perhaps those cables did not like that kind of grease. So I just picked up some new housing at the bike shop, and the shifting is greatly improved. No friction at all in the shifting now. So I've said this before, but the cable routing on this bike is awesome. And you know, when you get a Niner, it has some guides to run the cables through easily, but running it from scratch, in other words, not using guides and just running the cables through the bike, was very easy to do because I had to replace the housing not only on the shifter but also on the remote lockout. Now the only thing that I'll say is a little bit negative about the remote lockout, so you've got this open position, one click down is in the middle, and then all the way down is completely locked out. Now this is somewhat progressive because I said in one of my earlier videos that all the way down is not locked out, but it is actually fully locked out because I didn't have the cable tight enough. But the one negative I can say is if I have it in the middle setting and then I pop it open to the fully open setting, sometimes it doesn't go over all the way. So let me show you what I mean. This is that's fully locked out, that's fully open, and that's right in the middle. So sometimes it'll hang up, and I'll just tap it here and see if it hangs up. So it's working well now, but there are a few times where it'll hang up. Now, after I changed the shifting housing, the cable housing, it greatly improved. It was hanging up a lot when I had friction in the cable. Now it's working really smoothly. So of course for the video it won't hang up, but there are a few times. But if it does hang up after a couple of bumps on a downhill, it will go back over to the fully open setting. And one last thing I'll mention about the remote lockout is originally I had it positioned outside, or actually inside of the brake clamp. I put it on this side, on the left side, so between the grip and the brake clamp, and that makes it really easy. I had to reach over just a little bit too far with my thumb, so I put it on this side, on the left side of that brake clamp, and it's just really easy to reach, really intuitive. Again, I find myself using it all the time, and sometimes if I have a climb or I just want to jump out of the saddle and hammer real quick, it's so quick just to do that. So again, my bias has changed and I'm really loving the remote lockout on this bike. Like I said in one of the previous videos, the only mods I've made on this bike is I've changed the handlebars out to a riser bar instead of a flat bar, my personal preference. I did put on an Ultegra cassette, and someone had asked me about this cassette in one of the comments. It's working flawlessly. I don't think I've had one misshift. I have not had any drop chains on this bike. So I'm saving the other cassette, the stock one, for trips to the mountains. And I did put on the Valor wheel set. That comes with a really nice carbon wheel set. I've got those up for sale. I've not used them yet, so I can't give a comparison to the Valors. They are a little bit wider. If the stock wheel set doesn't sell by mid to late December, then I may just put the tires on and put those on and use it as a backup wheel set. But the Valor wheel set is running great on this bike. The Fox step cast fork on this bike, I've been really impressed with it. It's as smooth as the previous Fox 100mm cross country forks that I've used. but it's just lighter. It's about a half-pound lighter. And I will do a separate review on this fork, but I am pleased with this. This is the fork that I would have placed on this bike had I built this bike up from scratch. In fact, I absolutely love the way this bike is spec'd. Shimano shifting, Shimano XT, and Fox suspension is just a really, really good build. It's what I would have done. I probably would have put on a Shimano crank, but this race face crank is just solid. I've used race face narrow wide chain rings before. They work great. No issues at all with this crankset. I did put on these little covers, these little boots at the end of the cranks just to protect them, but everything on this bike is working flawlessly. No mechanical problems at all. Again, shifting and function of the remote lockout has greatly improved since I changed out the cable housing. So I would say if you're going to build one of these up, if you use the stock Jaguar cables, don't do any grease. Maybe something really light like some GT85 or Tri-Flow, but no grease on those cables. Just something I learned there. Oh, and the other mod, I did put on the Schwalbe tires, the Schwalbe Rocket Rons, instead of the Maxxis that comes with this bike. Again, if those wheels and tires don't sell, I'll put the stock ones back on and report how they compare to these. But I just love the Schwalbe tires, especially for the area that I ride. They work really, really well. So that'll wrap up this review of the Niner RKT9. Again, this is my second update of this bike. The next review probably will be just a complete rundown, a review that can stand alone, covering every aspect of the bike, and I'll probably do that in another month or two. So if you have any questions or comments, as always, leave them below. And if this kind of video is helpful for you, please give it a thumbs up for me. Thanks for watching.